exciting about India? You know, we've been seeing a lot of you and a lot of all of you since last 1.5 years. What's exciting? What's getting you here?
Dosas for breakfast is what's really exciting. Well, I think we've been starting to be more active in India. I think we've done a little over 10 investments now. And even though I hadn't been to India before 2 years ago, I've been here 5 times in the last year and a half. And now that Pankaj is on board over here, we're trying to get a lot more stuff off the ground. Also seems like the overall environment here is getting a lot more active. So even just in the last few years, I've been noticing there's a lot more people doing stuff. And I don't know, it just seems like there's real fire in India. So hopefully we can get involved with some of that and invest in some companies.
Okay, so you did some, you know, there were some investments made.
Yeah. Actually, I think 4 companies out of this last batch came out of India.
Yeah.
That we did.
And we heard some amazing numbers that we see this year, a lot more investments happening.
I think people in the press are inflating those numbers. We say we're going to do 10, and then somebody says, oh, you're going to do 20, and then somebody else says, oh, they're going to do 50. So, I don't know. I'm pretty sure we'll probably do at least 10 and maybe up to 20. Depends on how crazy your drug package gets. You know, you might do more than that.
Okay, great. You know, many entrepreneurs are very curious to know how do you do the, you know, this is a rhetoric question, but how do you do the selection?
We grab a dartboard and we just start throwing shit. Well, I think a lot of the same things that we're interested in the States, we're also interested in here. So, you know, we probably have a preference for things that have a basic revenue model that seems pretty obvious.
Okay.
A lot of core services, you know, jobs, housing, travel, you know, matrimony, maybe other areas that are pretty straightforward. We've done a lot of stuff in consumer commerce. We're doing more stuff in education and family areas also.
Okay.
And I would probably even say there's a lot of, you know, web-hosted business productivity tools for India, both enterprise and small business, that over the next 5 years will be coming up as well. So I don't know, it's a pretty broad spectrum of things that we look at. Usually we are looking for at least a functional prototype that's already, you know, somewhat usable. Doesn't have to have a lot of customers, but you know, that obviously helps as well. And then on the team side, looking for at least a strong engineer or 2, and then hopefully a designer or somebody doing marketing if either of those 2 skills are available.
And do the companies have to be India focused or global?
We're agnostic on that. I think, you know, we're interested in both global focus as well as Indian focus. You know, it kind of depends on what the opportunity is in the domestic India focus, but I do think we're pretty big believers in the domestic India market being a real opportunity over the next few years.
One quick question. What do you guys perceive? You know, it's just understanding what's happening in Valley. What do you perceive India as a great market with a huge number? We always hear about, you know, whatever is written there is about the great big market that we have in the number. Or do you see India now emerging as, you know, what weighs more, India's developer ecosystem? Because in Bangalore, a lot of tech product companies are coming in.
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of talent in India that, you know, definitely a lot of engineering talent. I think the areas that we're still maybe trying to find more folks to jump in on is design and marketing areas. So that's not unique to India. We have the same issue as the States as well, but maybe there's, you know, less of that tradition here. It's possible maybe some folks in the, you know, the Bollywood and media industries out of Mumbai might provide some design and marketing talent that shifts over to the startup world at some point. But, you know, I think the biggest issue is really finding access to capital and access to mentorship in India that seems to be, you know, developing, but still maybe only 1 generation old in India, where, you know, in the Valley we're really fortunate we have 30, 40 years of folks doing that type of stuff. Maybe in India there's only been folks around for 5 to 15 years. And then particularly on the investing side, I think, you know, when it's possible to have people who both have operational experience and dollars to put to work, it's great to get both of those in the same package, but in a lot of places outside California, you might find that the people doing the investment aren't always going to be the people with the operational experience. So you may have to seek out both as separate resources.
Just taking this conversation further, is that I've seen you talking, and at least the tweets, and a lot of conversation on the team, and we met Paul also last time,
yep.
And there was this whole focus on what you guys emphasize on is that building team, retaining great quality talent, and this is a big issue for us here, like as startups, hiring, retaining. What are some of the best practices that you follow that you could share?
Oh, well, paying people helps. I think when we're getting involved with investing in companies, usually it's not large teams. So usually it's between 2 to 5 people. Maybe they might grow to 10 before they sort of get out of the range that we're focused on and start raising from larger sources. So I think although there's a lot of people who have engineering talent, having someone who can do a little bit of leadership and hiring or can learn those skills is pretty important. Creating at least a culture that people are attracted to is really important. It's kind of a fuzzy thing. It's hard to really define, like what's the best practice for creating great culture? Could be a lot of different things. Could be like people going out to have dinner together. It could be people who are really into researching new topics and have a tradition of writing or talking about the subject matter. But I think everybody needs to just figure out how do you create your own sort of interesting work experience that's going to be more than just dollars. Usually I don't think that salaries are not going to be the most competitive area for you to build a culture and attract a team. It's going to be based on the opportunity, based on the story, and really seeing building something that people can, feel like their heartstrings tug at a little bit, and at least they feel like it's a great group of folks to hang with.
Awesome. You built a great brand, 500 startups. You can never be asked anyone that, hey, connect us to someone in Bali. They say 500 startups. Can you hear me now? Hello, what have you done? Can you hear me now? So I was just telling Dave that he has built a great brand in Silicon Valley, and we all know, I think all of us are here because we know about him, and most of the people who come from Valley or we connect to, they say, hey, you guys should get in touch with 500 startups. So now you have to tell us how you've done that. You've not been there for 30, 40 years, it's pretty young. How have you built this?
I don't know exactly
how
to do that.
No, you're doing a lot of things right.
I think, so we have a lot of fun. I think for us, we've kind of made a cultural value statement that fun comes first, which is a little unusual for somebody in business or investment. But kind of, if you think about that, fun and education, I guess, are probably two of the things that we think are really important. So that keeps people engaged in their work, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. We do a lot of stupid and silly things, and actually that, for some reason, has attracted more folks along the way. I think, because we're a very active investor, we get seen by a lot of people, and maybe that overinflates our potential importance. But probably also just because we've been active in a lot of different parts of the world, and that's been a big focus for us. That's resonated with people outside the country. But we're trying to do some interesting and different things. We are probably, even though we're on the investing side, we consider ourselves entrepreneurs, and in our own way are trying to disrupt a little bit of the industry. But yeah, I think trying to do things in unusual and different ways, hopefully without getting arrested, and trying to make that stick. But I think for whatever reason, a lot of people have picked up the culture of the brand and adopted it for themselves, which is very, that's very empowering. It's kind of nice when you walk in and people sort of like are wearing a t-shirt or, embrace you. This just sounds like super fucking sappy, I'm sorry. People like you, wow, okay, great, thank you. We have fun, let's keep it at that.
You know why I was asking this question? Because in India, we have this thing, a conversation which keeps coming up is that tech startups are building great products. But somewhere what we feel we're lacking is in marketing or selling or branding. And I think 500 startups has done that very well. And some of your portfolio companies are doing that very well. So do you think there are certain things that we can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about marketing, even though a lot of us come from engineering backgrounds. I started out as a programmer, but ended up a little bit more on the marketing side later in my career. I think initially when I started out, I was very suspicious of people in sales and marketing, and kind of thought they were really just, overpaid and not that necessary. It was really all the programmers that, deserved the money, and these evil salespeople that we had to have on staff were tolerated at best. And then, lo and behold, a few years later, I became one of those sales and marketing people. And I think you start to understand a little bit more that they are not just a necessary part of the operation, but actually even an interesting and I don't know, I consider myself a relatively social geek, and I've found that marketing can be as creative as the programming process in a lot of ways. So, we spend a ridiculous amount of time on things that you just think are kind of like silly and stupid. Like we did this announcement recently about our new application process on AngelList for the next batch, and we decide, usually when we do these announcements, we do some kind of like funny theme or movie or something. Christine and I really enjoyed, my partner Christine Tsai and I enjoyed doing that stuff. So we were like, okay, let's do a Star Trek theme. And then one of the guys on the team started just doing this photo mashup of, like, it was a picture of Captain Kirk, and we were all in chairs, and I had this hairpiece on that looked ridiculous. And it was like, and we were sitting there spending hours photoshopping this picture. And I'm like, do other VC firms do this? I'm pretty sure they don't do this, right? Like, we're just sitting like, oh, that's great. Let's add a picture of Naval with like Spock ears, and then let's do a logo with like, and so we kind of get into it, probably way more than is really necessary. But I think it's weird to say, like, there's an attention to detail in marketing that we really enjoy, and I think you build and tell a story, and it's an important part of what you're doing. And sometimes I think a lot of people, particularly the venture profession, just overlook that. There's a lot of folks who, for whatever reason, still think, suits and ties, or even, the khakis are kind of the thing that they're trying. And I don't know really where they're getting that from. I guess they're getting it from like Wall Street and bankers, and trying to convince people that they're professional and reliable and trustworthy with their money, and then somehow that tracks into venture capital and startups, but that's not at all the way that I think about it. Like, I think, we need to, be comfortable with the people we're investing in, and they need to feel comfortable with us, and like, me trying to look like I dress better than them is not helping that. And so having a level of transparency, a level of comfort with the people that we're trying to connect with is important. And I think differentiating from other folks who are a little bit more stuck up, and I might say sometimes have a stick up their ass, it's actually really easy. Like, that's the thing that's been surprising to me is, there's a lot of things that are hard about our job and trying to figure out how to raise money, how to invest appropriately, keep track of everything that's going on, ridiculous amounts of inbound email. But the marketing side is ridiculously fucking easy because everybody else is so goddamn boring. And like, it's just easy. You just actually be who you are, and like have a real voice, and like talk to people and have a beer every once in a while. And like, it's amazing how many people in the venture capital profession do their damnedest to not try and do those things. And like, I think everybody just, if they would just relax a little bit, they'd have a much easier time marketing themselves.
I think as startups we'll be less intimidated by them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes people worship venture capital and put it up on a hill. I often think that we're more like, glorified mortgage processors than anything else. Our job is really to find smart people and give them money. And that's, a lot of times it's not that much more complicated than that. There's things that I think we do that are different, that are fun for us. Like we do a lot of conferences and events. We do stuff like GeeksOnAPlane, and you know, I was commenting with someone on the bus when we were driving over here how like the profession of venture capital is just like this weird thing. Like you could write 5 checks a year and call yourself a venture capitalist, and that would be it, right? Or you could do a whole bunch of analysis and call yourself a venture capitalist, or you could get on a plane and hold like these events and call yourself a venture capitalist. So like the job definition is so incredibly different depending on who's doing it, which I think makes it interesting. There's a lot of different ways to, you know, have an investment thesis and go after building a brand and finding, you know, deal flow and investing in companies. So I think it's a very, again, creative exercise and opportunity.
No, but we definitely like venture capitalists like you. Quickly, moving.
People like money. What a surprise!
Quickly moving to the next question, and you have to give us an honest answer here and tell us, spill some secret things here. Is you must have got a lot of applications last year from India. Did you?
Yes, I think we got quite a number. Pankaj can tell us more about all that, but we got a lot of interest.
Yeah. So did you know? So tell us, what did you see in the applications working or not working? Because I'm sure many of the entrepreneurs who come here today would apply to 500 startups, and they would like to know.
Well, I think I probably want to get Pankaj up here and give you some first-hand train wreck stories, but. You know, a lot of times the idea is still very early and there's not much product there. That's probably the biggest issue, is that, you know, people haven't built something that's tangible yet. The other thing is they have built something and it's kind of not obviously how that helpful to someone. So there's still, I want to say this politely without pissing people off, but in both Japan and India and a few other places, I've noticed people like to copy the sexy, flashy shit that TechCrunch writes about. Drew, apologies, not you, of course. And you know, there's a lot of people writing about social media bullshit with no obvious revenue model. And you know, although it's great that Instagram got bought for $1 billion, I don't think that helps the trend. I think people still are paying too much attention to, you know, glittery things that are fun but aren't necessarily solving real problems. And you know, we just came from Redbus, and I'm super impressed with that company. I mean, it solves a real everyday problem for people in extreme amounts of detail. They were going through like how to make people's lives better, even down to the details of like if you're going to sit on the bus with your kids and understanding that like maybe the left side of the aisle is split and the right side isn't, so you could like have the kids sit between you. And like, I was just fascinated by the guy who was giving us the demo and his level of product knowledge and experience as we're going down. I mean, you can think about like, you know, there's 1 billion people in India, a lot of people ride buses. It's not a sexy problem, but it's a real problem. And people pay real money to have it solved. And I think that would be the thing that I would love to communicate to people is, you know, you don't have to work on the sexiest, you know, Twitter visualization, whatever bullshit news aggregation service. And sometimes you just got to solve a problem that's really very basic. And if you do that well, that can be a really interesting business. And I think that's the kind of stuff that, you know, we're looking for. There's a company called Farmeron that we found out of Croatia on AngelList that's doing web analytics for dairy farmers, right? Basically trying to identify milk production for dairy farmers. Again, not a very sexy business, but farmers in Croatia are willing to pay $1,000 a year for web analytics for cows because it matters to them. Right? And it turns out there's a lot of cow farmers in the world. There's like millions of them. And so, yeah, as much as maybe 500 Startups is a little crazy and wacky about certain things, we're really unsexy about the kinds of businesses that we like to invest in.
we've been hearing enterprise, this is the year of enterprise software.
The year of enterprise software. That's because people can't figure out how to make money on mobile. It's not really the year of enterprise software.
So what are you betting on?
Well, I kind of think that statement's bullshit. I mean, so I guess what you're getting at, there was a post by Fred Wilson a few months back about investor sentiment shifting back into enterprise.
Yes.
And probably there is some really cool stuff going on in the enterprise just because mobile applications are making their way into the enterprise, and finally a lot of people are pretty comfortable having stuff outside the firewall, so you can do a lot more interesting things in the enterprise, and maybe there's even some consumer marketing techniques we can start to use in the enterprise. So all those things are true, and there's lots of money being spent by larger businesses, so I understand why it is sexy. I don't understand why it's sexy again. It's like, if you thought enterprise was sexy, it's been sexy forever. There's nothing that dramatically new about all that. But what I really think Fred was kind of getting at was a lot of people who put money into mobile applications over the last 2-3 years have found it difficult, and have found the companies they've invested in, both in terms of getting distribution and customer usage, and also getting monetization, that those have been challenging. I tend to not agree that that's a good reason to leave. I take issue with some stuff that Fred was saying, that it's harder to get customers than ever before on mobile. I think that's bullshit. That's absolutely not true. It's still hard, but it's easier if you've been trying to learn how to get customers over the last couple of years. There's certainly not the same established techniques in search or social. There's not necessarily obvious paid or organic methods in mobile that are easy for everyone to emulate. So if you're trying to figure out search and you know how to do SEM, or you know how to do paid search marketing, those are ways to get traffic in search. If you understand viral loop, or you understand other things in social platforms, there's ways to go after that. In mobile, it's not quite so easy. It's a lot of editorial finagling with people like Apple. It's trying to figure out other distribution channels that maybe are not mature yet for Android and iOS platforms. But at the same time, we've invested in companies that do have millions of downloads and even millions of users on mobile. Vineet, Teleport Me, I think has 3 million downloads. I don't know active use, but probably in the hundreds of thousands. A couple of companies out of Taiwan that we've invested in that, in a year we're able to get to 3 to 5 million active users on a monthly basis. So, distribution can happen if you're smart, particularly I think if you understand social distribution techniques. A lot of mobile growth is happening through social channels. And then monetization, not easy, but again, there are different ways to make money in mobile, both in terms of paid apps and other, in-app usage. So I think that although mobile first may have not been the best advice 3 years ago, mobile first or second is probably good advice right now. It's undeniable there's huge amounts of Android and iOS devices in the field. What I think was lost on people was, just because there's devices out there doesn't necessarily mean that applications get onto those devices, doesn't necessarily mean that people get paid for usage of those applications. So I think there's a disconnect between purely number of devices in the field and the user experience and app store experience and wallet experience that are necessary to make those interesting environments for app developers. And at least for right now, Apple's probably done a better job of that than the Android platforms, but probably over the next 2 or 3 years, I think the Android platforms will start to catch up, and certainly internationally, they have a lot more visibility. But just in general, I think while enterprise is interesting, it's tougher to do customer acquisition distribution on enterprise, I think. In a lot of cases, getting scalability in enterprise software means having great salespeople, and that's not always an easy thing to replicate at scale. It's probably the reason why we as a company, rather than sort of said, have focused more on consumer and small business, because we can use consumer marketing techniques and we can use search and social and other platforms to go after. So for us, I think the real opportunity has been this explosion of search and social and mobile and now video and local platforms, and the marketing techniques available on those platforms are still nascent. right? And so I would actually say that because mobile is hard, that's why it's actually so fucking interesting. Is because if it were easy, everybody would be doing it. And I think, you know, you can reach billions of people, literally billions of people, on multiple platforms these days. And so if you are able to perfect and get those techniques right, this is what I think is lost on a lot of entrepreneurs. I think a lot of people in internet entrepreneurship who are doing stuff are focusing way too much on the engineering component and product development. And not to say that those aren't important pieces, but it's actually kind of fucking easy to build a decent product these days. The challenges are building a great UX experience around that product and getting distribution. And so I think, you know, if you consider yourself, you know, a well-rounded entrepreneur, programming is just one piece of that. And really understanding user experience in a compelling way, in a measurable way, understanding how to do internet marketing techniques, which is, you know, there's a lot of different things to understand on internet marketing. There's like 10 different channels that are probably interesting to explore. Like that's where I think we've really done ourselves a disservice. We have not explored, you know, programming has changed modestly in the last 10 to 20 years. Marketing has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. Like the relative pace of change in marketing versus technology is dramatic. The fact that we're still focusing on engineering and programming being the primary sort of like, you know, godlike quality for entrepreneurship is a fucking fail. Like, you should be focusing on the marketing component. That is the piece that has changed. That is the piece that has really become amazingly powerful, and most of you are still retarded about how to fucking do that shit. And you're not even, you don't even know that you're retarded. Sorry, to be politically incorrect. And so, you know, getting back to this whole thing about why enterprise software is like sexy again, it's because they're taking a fucking like pass at this. They're basically saying, oh, well, we tried mobile distribution and monetization, that was hard. Let's go back to that other shit that we know how to do, which is enterprise sales. And what is that? Well, we gotta find a good enterprise salesperson. Like, that's lame. That's fucking lame. Like, what's going on right now? We're selling billions of devices on mobile. It's hard, yes, but you gotta figure it out. If you figure it out, the world's your goddamn oyster. So maybe all of you should stop worrying about programming right now and start trying to figure out what kind of internet marketing and distribution techniques work for mobile, or work for social, or work for video. And really, like, that's the key. Because probably most of you can build a decent product. But if you can find a great designer and figure out really good marketing techniques, then you can really go balls out crazy. And then people will write you big ass checks. We have beer or at least water.
Yeah.
Kingfisher water. Branded water. Sorry, I went off a little bit on that. I felt like, you know, Fred's really smart and actually one of my investors. But I do think that the advice 2 or 3 years ago to go mobile first was a little premature, at least for the US market, and the advice to go back to enterprise now is not correct. And so stay the fucking course, figure out distribution on mobile. In 2 or 3 years, we'll have some really amazing opportunities based on that.
You know, the only answer I can give to this is, being an Indian, I cannot be like you. So I would say...
Why not?
So the only thing I can say is that it's impressive. Thanks so much. I think everyone will agree to this. You know, we don't hear such candid conversation.
Indians are passionate people. Bullshit. Indians are passionate people. I've worked with Indians for 20 years. They are not shy people. They brag like nobody's business. Indians brag almost as much as black people or Italian people. Possibly more. In fact, I think black people, Italian people, and Indian people are all, at least South Indian people, are probably all related. Like, they all like drive flashy cars. They all wear lots of gold chains. They all talk
that happens in Delhi. No?
Oh, that's the Punjabis. Okay, sorry. Sing is king. We're talking about.
Yeah, we are very non-flashy people, but Dave, this was very, very awesome. Thank you so much. You know, last we are all about stories, and I've asked you this before in Delhi when we met, is that, what keeps you so excited? We see you every morning getting up, I don't know what time it is, for us it's night, and you're tweeting with such passion, and you're flying all over. What's so motivating, exciting for you? Of course, you're the co-founder of 500 startups, but where does this energy come from?
I don't know. It's just I'm really lucky to have the job that I do, and you get to see entrepreneurship in all its forms and all different colors and all places on the planet. I don't see how that couldn't be exciting. I feel like we've had the opportunity to make some impact in a couple of places where there isn't always a lot of investment. Not necessarily India's further along, but I mean, I'm talking places like Croatia or Taiwan or other places that did our first investment in Jordan, did our first investment in Korea, and I think it's great to see people feel like they've got something that's rolling. I think sometimes the worst thing about Silicon Valley on parade is people want to put Silicon Valley on a pedestal and emulate it. And I always want to have people put someone who looks the same color as you, who's lived in the same town as you, put that person on a pedestal. Yeah. The guys who should be on pedestals in India are the founders of Redbus or Flipkart or Naukri or whatever, in Mobi. Those folks have done amazing jobs, and they've probably had a harder time than people in the valley. And so I think it's always more powerful to see, your own local hero do well. And for me, that's actually powerful. I think when we come around, part of what we really emphasize is that diversity is important for us, and finding entrepreneurs from all over the world is important for us, and from all genders and from all walks of life. And so that is great. And it's really, I feel sappy when I'm saying this shit. It's actually amazing to see people start businesses and empower themselves all over the world. And I really feel like that's as powerful a force in people's lives as maybe religion or politics or other things have been in the past. And entrepreneurship is an incredibly unifying theme. I think it's just we get welcomed by people all over the world whose politics don't mix. I think it's probably not politically correct to talk about it in India, but I think Pakistan is a nation of 120 million people. We haven't done an investment in Pakistan yet. That's something that's probably on our radar. I think trying to figure out investment in the Arab-speaking world, even though there's tons of entrepreneurship happening out of Israel, I think it's important to recognize there's a large group of people that speak Arabic, 300 to 500 million people, and that's growing. In our own backyard in the U.S., I think Spanish speakers in Latin America are overlooked sometimes. India and China are often talked about as more important actors on the economic stage than Latin America, and yet, for the U.S., they're hours away. So I think sometimes just letting everyone be part of that world stage in their own way is really important. And so if we can be the littlest oomph to get them started on that, then that's just an awesome gig.
This is awesome. I think we are really impressed.
As an investor and an entrepreneur, what's been your biggest disappointment and what have you learned from it?
Biggest disappointment? Well, me, probably. I wish fundraising were a little easier for us. I think that it's been challenging to kind of figure out that side of our business. We've got no end of access to deal flow, but understanding the process of raising money is a difficult one, a new one, at least from the folks that we need to raise money from, which is probably different entities than maybe the same folks that entrepreneurs raise. I think being able to have a little bit more reach and depth. I think we intentionally have an investment strategy that's quantitative in nature and high volume in nature. Sometimes we can't have as much touch with individual entrepreneurs as we might like. In a few situations, in the last year, we had some entrepreneurs that had very difficult times. yeah, can't change everything, but sometimes you wish you could. But I think on the flip side of that, I've actually been really, happy with where things have gone. As much as it's been a challenge for us getting a venture firm off the ground in the last 3 years, it has been, rewarding to see some of the impact and some of the scale that we're getting to now. And I think building community and having that be a support network for entrepreneurs, for each other, has been great. And I think that's one thing we've been able to do very quickly that even a lot of firms that have been around for 20 years haven't been able to do. Google Glass.
And how do you think that will change computing and startups' approach to technology in the next few years?
I have no fucking idea. They look really cool and sexy. Actually, I got a chance to play around a little bit. One of the guys from Google Ventures came with us on a trip to New Zealand in December, and we were playing with it a little bit. It's tough to bet on whole new platforms, particularly hardware-based platforms. I think Google's got enough, money and visibility that they could probably make that happen. But having a wearable device with potentially, large or infinite screen size, depending on if they can get that to work. There's been science fiction written about that shit for 20 years, so maybe we actually start to get playing with it now. It could be fun. I think they have to prove that they can get a mass market channel for that stuff out. So, I don't know, they're trying to get Google retail stores off the ground and trying to figure out new design form factors for glasses. It could work. I tend to be a little skeptical about that shit until you start to see unit sales in tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions would be necessary to really see that. But you look at something like this, and this didn't exist 3 years ago, and now it's hundreds of millions of units. So why not?
So my question is, you've been global, you've been in different countries, right? So marketing in India and marketing outside India seems to be two different fields. I was wondering if you could share some of your experiences from that and see.
I would hesitate to give advice there because I'm not so culturally fluent that I know the difference. But yeah, I would agree with you that good marketing is probably different culture by culture. But that's not to say that smart people who pay attention to marketing couldn't figure that out. So I think the thing is more than just I don't think we pay as much attention or give it as much importance as it needs. And yeah, it's hard for me to really say that I've experienced in marketing in 10 different languages. We've invested in companies that have done that, but I think we're still building that knowledge base. Sex sells. Maybe not in the Middle East. Maybe that's different.
Failure is still not considered cool in India.
Failure should never be considered cool.
No, what I mean to say is
it's not fucking cool.
Let me rephrase it, right? People who learn from their mistakes.
You ever got shot down by a girl you really want to go out with? Failure is not cool. Sorry. I guess, how do we combat that issue? I mean, there's a certain tolerance of failure, a certain importance. It's not failure itself, it's the willingness to fail and what you learn, hopefully, from failed attempts that are useful. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think, I just gave a talk about this in Osaka in Japan. It's much more of an issue there. It's really hard to have failure acceptance in Japan, and entrepreneurship suffers there because of that. It's difficult, and really the culture is not supportive of that in a lot of ways. It's supportive of other things that they have benefits and advantages in, but that's not one of them. And I think in probably Indian society and the UK society and a few other places, government and finance and other corporate jobs are probably safer bets, and for a lot of parents that may seem the better career path. So there's a lot of things about entrepreneurship which are not safe and are not even smart. You could probably argue that most people who decide to become entrepreneurs are stupid and crazy. On average, they're not going to have a lot of positive outcomes out of that. So I don't know. I think you have to create a supportive peer network that enables people to fail gracefully, but hopefully gets them to pick themselves up off their feet and try again. I think the thing that's good about Silicon Valley is people don't get rewarded for failure, but they're not penalized for failure. And so it's an accepted part of the process. And I think if you have done 3 startups before that all failed, we're going to look closely to understand what were the lessons that you learned out of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a badge of honor that you fucked up 3 startups. If you learned something out of those 3 and you had successive, maybe you got some user distribution here, maybe you learned product development there, then it maybe makes sense. So, I don't know, no easy answers to that. I think any society that doesn't have as much tradition of entrepreneurship is not going to tolerate failure well. It just takes time to have those heroes.
Dave, quick question.
Yes.
You've been going on the AngelList platform this year, and so how do you? They're investors as well. They do their own investments, and then you've got YC and all of these guys. How do you kind of see all these things working together in the future?
So I wrote a post about 3 or 4 months ago talking about evolution of venture capital, where I mentioned a lot of different themes happening. Primary among those was AngelList and YC. Before them, maybe first round capital around Conway, and then at the larger end of the scale, maybe folks like Andreessen Horowitz. So I think there's 2 big things that are happening. One is capital is sort of getting commoditized. There's a lot of folks who have money. And the other thing is that brand differentiation around non-capital activities is important. So understanding how you have some identifiable benefit that's not just money. So for a group like Andreessen Horowitz, it might be, hey, we're trying to make really, really big companies, and so we're going to emphasize recruiting and business development as really important things to get from 50 to 500 people. And because of that, we're going to build out a lot of infrastructure on our fund that helps you with, maybe recruiting and business development, corporate development. They maybe haven't gotten all the way there yet, but that's an interesting thesis, right? And if you look at other large funds in the Valley, they haven't invested similar resources in those areas. So at least I would give them credit for trying. The problem to be solved is how do you create big companies? You could certainly make the case that scaling up the organization and scaling up sales are 2 of the biggest challenges for those large organizations. And the fact that no other large VC has really looked at that and said, oh, those are the big problems to solve. Let's spend more money of our own instead of taking it home in fees to figure out how to do those problems better, solve those problems better. And so that's kind of cool. I think if you look at first round capital, they've done some interesting things in building entrepreneur-focused programs, maybe education-oriented. I think that's cool. Obviously, I think YC on the low-end scale went after some really interesting things just in terms of sample size. They built a community that was, very powerful. It is very powerful, both online and otherwise. And then I think, AngelList is the other really big disruptor. There's some other point solutions that I think are interesting. Science in LA, BetaWorks in New York. There's different ways to go after doing investment that I think are interesting. And then, we've tried to do it in a couple different ways. One is around community and events, and the other one is around global. Maybe in a few other areas, investment in women, investment in design. So I think if you are trying to build the next generation, investment, whether it's as an individual or as a firm, you just can't rely on being on Sand Hill Road and having $500 million as being your, path to glory. There's plenty of people who have that, and I don't even think being on Sand Hill Road is really all that much of a benefit these days. So it's the same as any other entrepreneur, right? You have to do competitive differentiation and figure out, what you're going to offer your customers, which in this case, are entrepreneurs. I really feel strongly that, community networks and education are a pretty big part of what we're trying to do. So building communities of either mentors or founders or both. doing education-focused events and having people come in who have operators to do those. Those are the areas that we're trying to emphasize. And then, you know, specifically with respect to YC, you know, we had a lot of thinking about like, well, how do we effectively compete with YC that's been around for a long time and trying to get our own differentiation. And for us, that was originally around design and marketing, somewhat around investing in women, and then definitely investing internationally was the other way that we did that. So it was just, you know, competitive differentiation matrix, and then trying to figure out like, let's do things that they're not doing. But I think that's the story writ large for everyone in the investing community. As things like AngelList and Quora level the playing field, people are going to have to differentiate themselves in new and interesting ways that aren't just about money.